The night was charged with tension before a single word was spoken. MSNBC's studios had been transformed into the arena for a special debate meant to showcase Rachel Maddow defending the network's flashy new spin-off project. The spin-off was supposed to be MSNBC's Rebrand moment, a way to grab younger audiences while doubling down on its loyal base. But as the cameras rolled and the audience packed with journalists, politicos, and skeptical independents settled in, it became clear this wouldn't be just another polished cable TV segment. The producers hadn't planned on Karoline Leavitt walking into the frame with the confidence of someone who knew she wasn't there to play defense. She was there to start a fire. Rachel Maddow began with her trademark calm, almost academic tone, trying to frame the network's spin-off as a bold step forward in information integrity. She adjusted her glasses, smiled for the camera, and launched into a monologue about how trust in institutions needed rebuilding and how MSNBC would be leading that charge. For a moment, she controlled the room, the applause trickled in, her base nodded, and the branding slogans flashed across the screens in slick graphics. But the calm didn't last long. Karoline, standing off to the side until that moment, stepped forward and leaned into her microphone. No rehearsed smile, no network polish. She went straight for the jugular. Rebrand? You're just painting a collapsing house a different color. People aren't turning off because you lack branding, they're turning off because you've lied to them for years. The audience gasped, and the producers fumbled behind the cameras, already realizing this was spiraling into something far bigger than a promotional segment. Rachel shot back with a sharp smile, pretending to be unfazed, but Karoline's words hit deeper than a soundbite. In one stroke, she reframed the night. This wasn't about marketing strategy, this was about truth versus spin. And in that moment, the real debate had just begun, raw, unscripted, and impossible for MSNBC to control. The studio lights burned hot as Rachel Maddow adjusted her glasses and leaned forward, determined not to let Karoline seize the spotlight so early. With that signature cadence that her viewers adored, she replied smoothly, Karoline, the only collapse I see is in the refusal of people like you to engage in reality. Our rebrand is about building trust, combating disinformation, and giving the public the truth they desperately need. She emphasized the word truth with a deliberate pause, as if she were laying down a card that would end the debate. But Karoline wasn't playing by Rachel's rules. She didn't flinch or look away. Instead, she smiled, the kind of smile that signals not amusement, but readiness for a counterstrike. Truth? Rachel, you built your entire career pushing a conspiracy about Russia that turned out to be as empty as the slogans behind you. Millions tuned in, believing every word, and when the facts collapsed, you just moved on to the next narrative. That's not truth. That's show business with a script. The audience erupted, not in polite applause but in a chaotic blend of cheers, jeers, and gasps. Some clapped furiously, thrilled to see someone saying out loud what they'd long suspected. Others booed, offended at the audacity of anyone calling out Maddow on her own turf. The producers frantically gestured at the stage managers to keep the noise under control, but it was too late. The tension was no longer confined to the stage. Rachel tried to pivot, her voice rising with a trace of indignation. This isn't about me. This is about protecting democracy from misinformation and bad actors who deliberately manipulate the public. We cannot afford to normalize dishonesty. She expected that line to rally the audience back, to restore her footing. Instead, Karoline pounced again, protecting democracy? Rachel, you don't protect democracy by lecturing people. You protect it by respecting them, by giving them the facts and trusting them to decide. Your network never trusted the American people. You treated them like children who needed stories to keep them afraid. It was a dagger cloaked in calm delivery, and the audience reacted again, louder this time. Rachel shifted in her chair, her practiced composure cracking just slightly under the weight of Karoline's attack. What was meant to be a showcase for MSNBC's Rebrand had transformed into a brutal referendum on the network's credibility, and Rachel knew she was on the defensive. The camera lights glared brighter as if they too sensed the storm building. Everyone in the room understood now, this wasn't just another debate. This was Karoline's attempt to strip Rachel, and MSNBC, of the authority they had wrapped themselves in for years. Rachel Maddow leaned back, forcing a small smile, but her eyes betrayed the pressure building inside. She was used to controlling narratives, to steering conversations back into safe waters, but Karoline wasn't letting her off the hook. The tension was thick, the kind you could feel crawling across the stage and into the audience. Karoline shifted in her chair, leaning forward now, her voice sharper and cutting through the applause and noise. Rachel, every time you say misinformation, what you really mean is disagreement. Anyone who questions your storyline becomes a danger to democracy. That's not journalism, that's censorship with better lighting. The words landed heavy, and the crowd roared again, some in approval, some in anger. Rachel raised her hand, trying to interject, but Karoline didn't give her the chance. Let's be real. You don't hold power to account. You defend it. Whenever the establishment needed a mouthpiece, there you were, Russia, COVID, elections, you name it. You don't investigate the government, you read its talking points. The audience erupted. Cameras caught faces in the crowd, some jaws dropped, others smiling in disbelief that someone dared to say it on live television. Rachel adjusted her glasses, her composure faltering. She had faced tough guests before, but this wasn't a debate she could steer with a clever pivot. Karoline was stripping the varnish off, live, in front of millions. Rachel tried to reclaim ground, her tone turning sharp. You are the one pushing division. You come here with insults and conspiracy claims. If you think shouting louder makes you right, you're mistaken. Karoline smiled again, unfazed. No, Rachel, I don't need to shout. The truth is loud enough. And right now, the truth is this: you've built an empire on fear. But people are waking up, and they don't need you to tell them what to think anymore. The words hit like a hammer. The studio felt like it was splitting in half the audience clapping so hard their hands turned red, the other half booing with raw frustration. And Rachel, for the first time in years, didn't have a comeback ready. This wasn't just a clash of ideas anymore. It was a battle over who owned the truth, the polished anchor with decades of influence, or the insurgent outsider who came armed with receipts and raw defiance. And everyone watching knew it was far from over. Rachel Maddow, stung by Karoline's relentless hits, leaned forward, her voice sharp and trembling with both anger and urgency. You're dangerous, Karoline. You and your movement are pushing America to the brink. You spread chaos, lies, and you profit from it. You're not a truth-teller, you're a provocateur. Her words echoed across the studio, crafted to paint Karoline as reckless, as someone unfit for serious debate. But Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly leaned back, crossed her arms, and let the silence linger for just a second too long, a silence that made Rachel's accusation feel desperate, almost panicked. Then she struck. Dangerous? Rachel, let me remind you who told America for 3 years straight that Russia had elected a president. You turned speculation into gospel and called it news. Families divided, trust shattered, and when it all collapsed, you didn't apologize. You cashed the checks and moved to the next storyline. That's not journalism, that's manipulation with a paycheck. The audience gasped. Some clapped instantly, while others jeered, but Karoline wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice tightening like a blade. You call me a provocateur, but Rachel, you've been provoking fear for ratings your entire career. You don't fight for democracy, you fight for viewership numbers. And the worst part? You pretend it's noble. Rachel's face tensed. The controlled smirk she used as armor was gone, replaced by something raw, anger, frustration, maybe even doubt. She tried to respond, but Karoline's momentum rolled over her. Let's get this straight. The only thing I profit from is the truth that people are starving to hear. Meanwhile, you've built a career on half-truths, panic, and spin. You told Americans what to fear, and then you sold them the cure. That's not reporting, that's theater. And tonight, the curtain just got pulled back. The crowd erupted. Some were shouting, others cheering. The studio turned into a storm of noise. The moderators tried to calm it down, but the energy was electric. Karoline had seized control of the moment. Rachel reached for her notes, fumbling as though to find a lifeline, but everyone watching could sense it. Her authority had cracked. This wasn't her arena anymore. For the first time in years, Maddow looked like the guest, and Karoline like the host. The clash was no longer just about policies or media ethics. It was about who the audience believed represented the truth, and in that moment, Karoline's unapologetic defiance was winning. Rachel Maddow, feeling the weight of the crowd slipping away, went for the only card she had left, a personal attack. She straightened her papers, forced her voice steady, and fired. Karoline, you're young, inexperienced, and frankly reckless. You come on this stage acting like you've got the answers, but you've never carried the responsibility of leadership. You're just an angry mouthpiece, chasing attention. That's not credibility, it's immaturity. The audience murmured, some nodding, others shaking their heads. Rachel thought she'd landed a decisive blow, the kind that reminded people why she had ruled primetime television for years. But Karoline only tilted her head and let out the faintest laugh, not mocking, but dismissive, as if she'd just heard the weakest argument of the night. She leaned in, eyes locked on Rachel, her voice calm but cutting like glass. Inexperienced? Rachel, maybe I haven't spent decades behind a teleprompter, reading lines written to keep powerful networks happy. But that's exactly why people listen to me. I'm not owned by ratings. I'm not owned by corporate sponsors. And I'm certainly not owned by political elites who love the sound of your voice because it keeps people distracted. The room shifted. Karoline's words carried the kind of energy you can't script. She paused for effect, then continued, you think youth is a weakness. I see it as freedom. I'm not weighed down by decades of compromise and cozy backroom deals. I represent the people who are sick of being lied to, sick of being told by you and your network what to believe. You may call me inexperienced, but Rachel, maybe what America needs is someone uncorrupted by the system that made you. Gasps turned into cheers. Maddow's attack had backfired. Instead of diminishing Karoline, it elevated her as a symbol of independence, someone unafraid to face down legacy power with raw conviction. Rachel tried to interject, her hand waving slightly as if to swat away the point, but Karoline didn't stop. She struck again, here's the truth, experience doesn't mean wisdom. Sometimes, it just means you've had more time to perfect the lies. And if being young, bold, and unafraid of you makes me reckless, then I'll wear it proudly. Because I'd rather be reckless with truth than careful with propaganda. The studio roared. Even those who disagreed with her couldn't deny the force of her delivery. Cameras zoomed in on Rachel, who now looked smaller, cornered, her authority visibly fractured. Karoline had turned the insult into a weapon, and in that moment, she didn't just counter Rachel's attack, she defined herself on her own terms. The battle line was redrawn, and Karoline was standing at the center of it, unshaken. Rachel Maddow, realizing the personal attack had only strengthened Karoline, shifted tactics. She forced composure, straightened her shoulders, and turned the debate toward policy. All right, let's cut through the drama, Rachel said, her voice crisp, steady, authoritative. We're here to discuss solutions. Karoline, you love pointing fingers, but when it comes to policy, climate change, healthcare, immigration, you don't have plans. You have slogans. People need leaders who can govern, not just grandstand. What's your solution? The crowd leaned forward, waiting. Maddow had drawn the fight into her territory, policy, where she'd built her reputation as the smart voice dissecting political complexity. For a brief second, she thought she'd pulled Karoline into waters where she could drown her with data and intellectual authority. But Karoline didn't flinch. She clasped her hands on the podium, her voice sharper than before, each word carrying both calmness and weight. You want solutions? Let's talk about solutions. But first, let's be clear, policy debates on your show are designed to sound like solutions while nothing changes. That's the game. Endless panels, endless discussions, and the same broken results. You frame it like complexity is strength. I say it's a cover for inaction. The audience stirred, some clapping, others silent, sensing the edge of something real. Karoline pressed forward, climate change. I support innovation, unleashing energy independence, and cutting through red tape to let entrepreneurs lead, not lobbyists. Healthcare? Give people choice, transparency, and competition, instead of backroom deals with pharmaceutical giants your network refuses to challenge. Immigration? Enforce the law. Secure the border. Protect citizens first. None of this is radical, it's common sense. The only reason it sounds extreme on your show is because truth doesn't sell ads. Her words landed like strikes. Maddow blinked, momentarily frozen, before attempting to interject. But Karoline anticipated it and leaned in harder. Rachel, your entire career thrives on making problems seem unsolvable. Because if people believed real change was possible, they wouldn't need you explaining every night why it can't be done. I'm not here to recite talking points from think tanks. I'm here to say out loud what millions of Americans already know: your policy debates are theater. I'm offering action. The studio erupted, applause and whistles slicing through Rachel's silence. Karoline had flipped Maddow's strongest card and turned it into an indictment of her entire platform. Rachel tried to regain control, shuffling her notes, forcing her lips into a thin line. But the energy in the room was no longer hers. Karoline hadn't just answered the question, she'd reframed the entire purpose of the debate. Rachel Maddow, cornered by the policy reversal, reached for the last weapon she knew resonated: emotions. Her voice quivered just enough to feel authentic, her tone pressing down on the crowd like a preacher summoning sympathy. Karoline, it's easy to stand there and tear down, she said, her hands outstretched as if pleading. But people watching at home, families struggling with medical bills, communities devastated by floods, children scared about their futures, they don't need slogans. They need hope. They need compassion. They need someone who feels their pain. That's what leadership is. Not finger-pointing, not insults. Empathy. The crowd softened. A murmur of approval rippled through the audience as Rachel's face appeared earnest, her reputation as the conscience of progressives leaning hard into the moment. For a flicker of time, she regained footing. Cameras zoomed in on her eyes, wet and shining. The set felt almost intimate, as if she were speaking not to Karoline, but directly into the living rooms of millions of Americans. But Karoline didn't give her the room to breathe. She struck back, not coldly, but with fire that felt sharper because it cut through the performance. Rachel, you've mastered this act. The soft tone, the trembling voice, the hand gestures. It's a script. And the cruelest thing about it is this: while you perform empathy on TV, the same people you claim to care about never see their lives improve. Gasps echoed across the studio. Maddow blinked rapidly, trying to hold her composure. Karoline leaned in, her voice rising, fierce but steady. Families drowning in medical debt? They don't need you lecturing about empathy, they need actual change. Flooded communities? They need real infrastructure, not another MSNBC town hall special. Children scared about the future? They need leaders who fight for solutions, not celebrities who sell fear every night at 9 p.m. You turn human suffering into ratings. You've built an empire on pain, and I'm here to say, enough. The crowd erupted, half stunned, half electrified. Some clapped hard, others sat stiff in silence, unwilling to cheer against Maddow but unable to deny the blow. Karoline paused just long enough, then delivered the line that hit like thunder: you say empathy is leadership. I say leadership is action. And the difference between us is this: you make money telling people why they should cry. I'm fighting to give them a reason to stand." The studio went wild, cheers, applause, and shouts drowning out Rachel's attempt to respond. The cameras caught her tight jaw, her face stiffening into a brittle smile. For the first time in years, Rachel Maddow wasn't in control of her own set. Rachel Maddow, rattled but unwilling to fully surrender her show, did what veteran hosts often do when cornered: she leaned on interruptions. Her voice, usually calm and deliberate, now snapped in, sharp and clipped. Karoline, please, let's keep this serious. Don't grandstand. This isn't a campaign rally, it's a discussion." She gestured firmly at the audience, trying to remind them that she was the anchor, the arbiter of who got the final word. But Karoline didn't shrink. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and held her ground. The audience, sensing the power shift, leaned forward. Every interruption from Rachel only made Karoline look more composed. With a half-smile that cut sharper than any insult, Karoline raised her hand slightly, as though dismissing Rachel's attempt to regain control. "Rachel, I know you're used to having the last word here. But tonight, you've met someone who isn't afraid of your studio, your script, or your interruptions. You wanted a discussion, fine. Let's discuss why your viewers are more informed about celebrity scandals than the corruption eating this country alive." The crowd exploded, some booing Maddow, others erupting in cheers for Karoline. Rachel's jaw tightened, she looked down at her notes, trying to find her footing again. Karoline pressed forward, her voice swelling with conviction, each sentence punching through Rachel's attempts to cut in. "The truth is simple, networks like this one survive by controlling the narrative. You filter reality, polish it, package it, and sell it as truth. And when someone like me shows up, who refuses to play along, you call it grandstanding. No, Rachel, it's called honesty. And honesty doesn't need a teleprompter." That line hit like lightning. Applause thundered across the studio, drowning out Rachel's protests. The cameras, sensing the drama, zoomed in on Karoline's face as she delivered what sounded less like a debate response and more like a manifesto. "You can interrupt me all you want. You can talk over me, roll the clips, spin the narrative, but here's what you can't do: stop the truth. Tonight, it walked onto this stage, and you don't know what to do with it." The audience erupted again, cheers so loud the producers in the control room frantically adjusted the audio levels. Rachel sat back, visibly shaken, her authority on her own stage slipping away minute by minute. For the first time in years, Rachel Maddow wasn't the moderator, she was the one being moderated, cornered not by questions, but by truth itself. The moment Rachel realized she was losing the crowd, her tone shifted from defensive to personal. Leaning forward, she tried to weaponize her authority with a direct jab. "Karoline, let's be honest. You're young, inexperienced, and you've built a career off sound bites. This isn't real journalism, it's a performance. You don't belong at this table." It was a low blow, the kind that wasn't about policy or facts but about discrediting the person herself. The audience murmured, half expecting Karoline to recoil, half eager to see if she'd strike back harder. Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she let a beat of silence fill the room, making Rachel's words hang in the air like smoke. Then, calmly but with razor precision, she delivered her counterstrike. "Rachel, if calling out corruption, defending free speech, and refusing to bow to media elites makes me inexperienced, then I'll wear that title proudly. Because what you call experience is exactly the problem: years of covering up, spinning, and talking down to the very people who trusted you to tell the truth." Gasps echoed across the audience. Some clapped instinctively, others sat stunned, waiting for Maddow to retake control. But Karoline wasn't done. She leaned toward Rachel, her tone sharp but steady. "You say I don't belong at this table? That's the arrogance that made millions tune you out. This table isn't yours, it belongs to the people. And when you dismiss me, you're dismissing them. You mock me for being young? Good. Because it means I'm not yet corrupted by the system that made you rich while leaving America poorer." The crowd roared, cheers shaking the stage. Rachel's face flushed with frustration. Her attempt to undermine Karoline had backfired spectacularly. Every camera in the room locked onto Karoline as she drove the final nail in. "So no, Rachel, I don't need your approval. I don't need your stage. And I certainly don't need your permission. What I need, and what America demands, is truth. And tonight, you proved you can't handle it." The audience erupted once more, this time louder than before, drowning out even the producer's frantic efforts to regain order. Rachel Maddow had tried to corner Karoline with an insult, but instead, Karoline turned it into her strongest moment yet, an unshakable declaration that the establishment's era was collapsing right in front of them. As the crowd's applause thundered, Rachel tried one last time to regain ground, fumbling for a rebuttal. But the timing was gone, the authority lost. Every word she attempted was drowned in the audience's clapping and cheers. The cameras, instead of focusing on MSNBC's queen, stayed locked on Karoline, the outsider who had just turned the stage upside down. Karoline stood tall, letting the noise swell before raising her hand for silence. Slowly, the audience quieted, hanging on what they knew would be her final word. Her eyes locked on Rachel Maddow, but her voice projected beyond her, to the entire nation watching live. "Rachel, you built your career telling America what to think. But tonight, America watched you get exposed, not by spin, not by bias, but by the truth. And the truth doesn't need a network. It doesn't need a contract. It doesn't even need your stage. It just needs a voice willing to speak it." The silence that followed was electric. Then Karoline leaned forward, her voice sharp as glass, delivering the line that would replay across social media for weeks. "You don't own the truth, Rachel. And after tonight, you don't even own the room." The crowd erupted, standing ovation, chants, and phones lifted high to capture the historic moment. Rachel Maddow sat frozen, her carefully curated persona shattered under the weight of Karoline's final strike. The control she once commanded slipped through her fingers, leaving her speechless on her own stage. Karoline, however, didn't linger. She gathered her notes, nodded once toward the roaring crowd, and walked off the stage with calm authority, as though she had planned every moment. It wasn't just a debate win, it was a cultural shift. By the time the clip hit Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, the hashtags were already trending, #Karoline won, #Truth over spin, #Maddow exposed. Commentators called it the mic drop of the year. Even her critics admitted she had flipped the script in a way nobody expected. In a single night, Karoline Leavitt had transformed from a rising voice into a symbol of fearless defiance against media giants. And Rachel Maddow, despite all her power and years on television, had no line strong enough to erase what had just happened. Tonight wasn't just another debate. This was the night the walls built by the media for years came crashing down. For too long, voices like Rachel Maddow's claimed to own the truth, to decide what America hears and what it doesn't. But millions just witnessed the truth break free, not from a studio script, but from the voice of the people. Karoline Leavitt's final words didn't just shut down a rival, they tore the mask off an entire establishment. "You don't own the truth, Rachel. And after tonight, you don't even own this stage." That line didn't simply end a debate, it ended an era. From this moment on, Americans know exactly who distorts and who delivers. One night, one line, and one act of courage rewrote the script they tried to control. Remember this, the truth doesn't need a network. It only needs one fearless voice. And tonight, that voice was Karoline's.